June 6, 1944. 6:47 in the morning. Commander Samuel David Dealey stood in the cramped conning tower of USS Harder, watching through his periscope as 3 Japanese destroyers cut through moonlit waters off Tawi Tawi in the southern Philippines. The destroyers were tracking his submarine with deadly precision, their bows throwing white spray as they increased speed to 35 knots. 37 years old, 5 war patrols already completed, 18 enemy ships destroyed in 14 months of combat operations. But Dealey had never faced 3 destroyers simultaneously hunting him with this kind of coordinated intensity. Samuel David Dealey was born in Dallas, Texas in 1906, the son of a railroad engineer who taught him that calculated risks beat cautious inaction. He graduated from the Naval Academy in 1930, spending the next 11 years on surface ships before volunteering for submarine duty in 1941, just months before Pearl Harbor. Most officers avoided submarines. The pay was marginally better, but the mortality rates were terrifying even in peacetime. Submarine accidents killed more sailors than any other naval branch during the 1930s. Dealey volunteered anyway, driven by something his classmates couldn't quite understand, a belief that submarine warfare would define the Pacific conflict. He was right. By 1944, American submarines were strangling Japan's economy, sinking cargo ships faster than Japanese shipyards could replace them. But Dealey saw a different mission. Everyone hunted cargo ships. Nobody hunted warships. The mathematics seemed suicidal. A submerged submarine moving at 9 knots attacking a destroyer moving at 35 knots. But Dealey had studied the problem obsessively during Harder's first 4 war patrols. He'd analyzed every destroyer attack, every evasion, every depth charge pattern. He'd identified a crucial weakness in Japanese destroyer doctrine. Their captains expected submarines to run. That expectation created predictable behavior patterns. Predictable behavior created exploitable opportunities. His executive officer, Lieutenant Frank Lynch, understood Dealey's philosophy better than anyone. Lynch had served under Dealey since Harder's commissioning in December 1942. He'd watched his captain evolve from cautious to calculated to downright aggressive across 5 patrols. "The skipper doesn't take unnecessary risks," Lynch explained to new crew members during their first patrol briefing. "He takes calculated risks based on understanding what the enemy expects. Japanese destroyer captains expect us to dive deep and run. They've trained for that scenario. They haven't trained for a submarine that charges straight at them." That philosophy had kept Harder alive through 5 war patrols when other submarines died following conventional doctrine. But it also created tremendous stress on the crew. Every man aboard knew their captain fought differently than other submarine commanders. Some called it brilliant. Some called it reckless. Everyone called it effective. The Imperial Japanese Navy had dispatched destroyers Minakaze, Hayanami, and Tanakaze with explicit orders. Eliminate the American submarine that had been terrorizing their supply lines for 3 consecutive weeks. Find it. Kill it. Don't come back until it's done. Until April 1944, American submarine doctrine was absolutely clear about Japanese destroyers. Avoid them at all costs. Run deep. Rig for silent running. Pray they pass overhead without detecting you. The mathematics of naval warfare made the doctrine sensible. A destroyer moved at 35 knots on the surface. A submerged submarine struggled to reach 9 knots even with maximum effort. Destroyers carried depth charges specifically designed to crack pressure hulls. They had sonar that could detect submarines at 3,000 yards. They had multiple 5-inch guns that could destroy a surface submarine in minutes. Between December 1941 and March 1944, Japanese destroyers had sunk 14 American submarines in the Pacific theater. 0 American submarines had sunk a Japanese destroyer, while both vessels were actively engaged in combat. The score was 14-0 in favor of the hunters. Commander Dealey changed that equation permanently on April 13, 1944, when destroyer Ikazuchi charged Harder's position at flank speed during a convoy attack off Wwii Atoll. Every officer on Harder's bridge expected the standard response: dive deep and run. Instead, Dealey ordered flank speed ahead, straight at the attacking destroyer. straight at 3,000 tons of steel moving toward them at 35 knots with orders to ram if necessary. At 900 yards, point-blank range in naval combat, Harder fired 4 Mark 14 torpedoes in a carefully calculated spread pattern. The submarine immediately dove beneath the destroyer's keel, passing so close that Harder's crew could hear the destroyer's propellers churning the water directly overhead. 2 torpedoes struck Ikazuchi amidships. The destroyer's magazines detonated. The explosion was so massive that Harder's crew felt the shockwave, even at 300 feet depth. The destroyer broke in half and sank in less than 5 minutes, taking 147 sailors with her. Dealey's radio report to Pearl Harbor Submarine Command became instantly famous throughout the Pacific Submarine Force, expended 4 torpedoes and 1 Jap destroyer. Admiral Sumu Toyota, Commander-in-Chief of the Japanese Combined Fleet, didn't find the report amusing when it was intercepted and translated by Japanese naval intelligence. Between January and May 1944, Japan had lost 23 destroyers to various causes: submarines, aircraft, mines, accidents. Every single loss made Operation Ago more difficult to execute. The plan to destroy the American invasion fleet approaching the Philippines required precise coordination between carriers, battleships, cruisers, and destroyers. Losing destroyers meant losing the screening vessels that protected capital ships from submarine and air attack. By late May 1944, Admiral Toyota had concentrated the Japanese mobile fleet at Tawi Tawi anchorage in the southern Philippines. 4 battleships, including the massive Yamato, the largest battleship ever constructed, 9 aircraft carriers, 15 cruisers, 28 destroyers. The largest concentration of Japanese naval power assembled since the Battle of Midway 2 years earlier. American codebreakers at Pearl Harbor knew exactly where the mobile fleet was anchored. They'd broken Japanese naval codes months earlier. Every radio transmission was intercepted, decrypted, and analyzed. Admiral Charles Lockwood, commander of the Pacific Submarine Force, sent USS Harder to patrol the waters around Tawi Tawi, with orders to attack any targets of opportunity. Dealey took his submarine into the most heavily defended Japanese anchorage in the Pacific and operated undetected for 9 consecutive days. Then at 3:00 in the morning on June 6th, a Japanese patrol plane spotted Harder's periscope wake 15 miles north of Tawi Tawi. 3 destroyers responded immediately with orders to kill the American submarine before it could escape. If you want to see how Dealey's revolutionary down-the-throat attack tactics turned out against 3 destroyers hunting him simultaneously, and how 4 days of submarine combat changed the course of the entire Pacific War, hit that subscribe button and smash that like right now, because this story gets absolutely insane. Commander Dealey studied the lead destroyer through his periscope, watching the warship's bow wave as it closed distance at maximum speed. Minakaze-class destroyer, 1,250 tons, 4 5-inch guns mounted in twin turrets, depth charges ready on stern racks, maximum speed 35 knots. She was closing fast, zigzagging unpredictably to avoid any torpedo attack. Behind Minakaze, 2 more destroyers had spread out in a search pattern, positioning themselves to box Harder into a kill zone with no escape routes. Standard American submarine doctrine in this situation was unambiguous: dive deep, go silent, hope the destroyers lose contact. Maybe survive. Probably die. But at least die following established tactical procedures. Dealey had spent 14 months developing a completely different response to destroyer attacks. He called it down the throat. Fire torpedoes straight at an attacking destroyer's bow, then dive beneath her keel before impact. If your torpedoes hit, the destroyer sinks before she can drop depth charges. If your torpedoes miss, the destroyer drops depth charges directly on your last known position and you die. High risk, high reward, no middle ground. He swung Harder's bow directly at Minakaze. Range, 1,100 yards. Time to collision at current closing speed, 96 seconds. Every man in Harder's conning tower knew exactly what those 96 seconds meant. They'd practiced this attack profile dozens of times during training exercises. They'd executed it successfully against Ikazuchi in April, but training exercises didn't involve 3 destroyers. and Ikazuchi had been alone, not part of a coordinated hunter-killer group. "Make ready tubes 1, 2, and 3, Dealey ordered. His voice was calm, conversational, like he was ordering coffee instead of setting up a point-blank torpedo attack against a destroyer, specifically hunting him. "Tubes 1, 2, and 3 ready, Captain," the torpedo officer responded. Dealey kept his eye pressed against the periscope eyepiece, watching Minakaze grow larger with every passing second. 750 yards. Range closing at combined speed of 44 knots. 60 seconds to collision. The destroyer's captain would be making calculations right now, trying to determine if the submarine would dive or maintain course, trying to decide whether to maintain ramming speed or slow down to deploy depth charges. Every second of hesitation was a second Dealey could exploit. At 750 yards, Dealey gave the order. Fire 1, fire 2, fire 3. 3. Mark 14 torpedoes left Harder's bow tubes at 3-second intervals. Each torpedo weighed 3,200 pounds. Each carried 643 pounds of Torpex high explosive. Each traveled at 46 knots, faster than any destroyer could turn away. "Take her down, 300 feet. Dive angle 30 degrees. Harder's bow dropped like a stone. The diving planes bit hard, forcing the submarine into a steep dive. The deck tilted at an angle that made walking forward nearly impossible. Men grabbed handholds, braced against bulkheads, held their breath. 40 seconds after firing, 2 massive explosions shook Harder so violently that light fixtures shattered throughout the submarine. Men were thrown against bulkheads. Equipment broke loose from mountings. The explosions felt like someone had hit the submarine with a giant hammer twice in rapid succession. Then a third explosion, even larger than the first 2, lifted Harder's stern 6 feet before slamming it back down. The noise was beyond description. Like being inside a bass drum struck by a sledgehammer, Dealey ordered Harder to level off at 300 feet. He climbed to periscope depth carefully, scanning the surface through the periscope's optical system. Where Minakaze had been 90 seconds earlier, he now saw floating debris and an expanding oil slick. The destroyer had broken in half and was already gone. Both pieces had sunk in less than 2 minutes after the torpedoes struck. The other 2 destroyers were racing away at flank speed, dropping depth charges randomly in their wake. They had no idea where Harder was. They'd just watched their squadron mate explode and sink in seconds, and they wanted no part of whatever had killed her. 1 destroyer sunk, 2 destroyers fleeing. The entire engagement had lasted less than 3 minutes from first torpedo firing to final sinking. Admiral Toyota received the news at 9 a.m. that morning. His immediate response was to order 6 more destroyers to join the search for the American submarine. By noon, Japanese patrol planes were searching the waters around Tawi Tawi every 20 minutes, looking for periscope wakes or surface submarines. But Dealey wasn't finished hunting. He was just getting started. June 7th, 1944. 2:30 in the morning. Harder surfaced in complete darkness to recharge her batteries. The night was pitch black. No moon, heavy cloud cover, visibility less than 100 yards. Perfect conditions for a submarine operating in hostile waters. Diesel engines roared to life, pushing cool air through the submarine's interior while generators recharged the massive battery banks that powered underwater operations. The crew rotated through the conning tower in shifts, breathing fresh air, stretching cramped muscles, grateful for a few moments away from the claustrophobic interior. At 3:12 a.m., the radar operator picked up a contact. Single ship, bearing 095 degrees, range 8,000 yards, closing fast at 28 knots. The contact was definitely a destroyer. No merchant ship moved at 28 knots. No cargo vessel would be operating alone at night in waters where American submarines hunted. Destroyer Hayanami, 1,700 tons displacement, had been searching for American submarines since 1 a.m. Her captain, Commander Hideo Kuboki, had received orders to return to Tawi Tawi at 3 a.m. He was exhausted from 6 consecutive hours of high-speed searching. Nobody expected an American submarine to attack on the surface at night. Submarines were supposed to hide underwater, not hunt on the surface like surface raiders. Dealey ordered flank speed. Harder's 4 diesel engines pushed the submarine to 21 knots, fast for a submarine, but still 7 knots slower than the approaching destroyer. But Dealey wasn't trying to outrun Hayanami. He was deliberately closing the range before the Japanese radar operator detected him. At 4,000 yards, Hayanami's radar picked up a surface contact, small, fast-moving. The radar operator assumed it was another destroyer returning to base. Japanese destroyers operated in these waters constantly. At 3,000 yards, Commander Kuboki realized his catastrophic mistake. That small, fast-moving contact wasn't a destroyer. It was an American submarine running on the surface, closing range deliberately for a torpedo attack. Kuboki ordered flank speed and turned to ram. Standard anti-submarine tactics. Use your speed advantage, close the range. Ram the submarine before it can dive. Too late. Dealey had already calculated the geometry. He'd positioned Harder perfectly for a broadside torpedo attack. At 2,300 yards, Dealey fired 4 torpedoes in rapid succession. All 4 tracks ran true. 2 struck Hayanami's starboard side near the aft magazine where depth charges and torpedo warheads were stored. The explosion was apocalyptic. Hayanami's entire stern section disintegrated in a massive fireball that illuminated the ocean for miles in every direction. The destroyer rolled 90 degrees to starboard, her propellers still spinning frantically, as she went under stern first, like a toy boat pulled down by an invisible hand. Commander Kuboki and 147 sailors died in less than 60 seconds. The destroyer was completely gone before most of the crew even understood they'd been hit. Dealey knew Japanese patrol planes would arrive within minutes, drawn by the massive explosion that had lit up the night sky. He ordered crash dive. Harder's ballast tanks flooded. The submarine disappeared beneath the surface in 40 seconds, diving to 300 feet while turning away from the sinking destroyer at maximum underwater speed. 2 destroyers in less than 24 hours. The Imperial Japanese Navy was now hunting Dealey with everything they had in the southern Philippines. Admiral Toyota was beyond furious when he received the report. 2 destroyers lost in 2 days to the same submarine. This wasn't just combat losses anymore. This was one American submarine commander, deliberately hunting Japanese destroyers and winning every engagement. Toyota pulled 8 destroyers from convoy escort duty and organized them into dedicated hunter-killer groups. Their only mission, find and destroy the American submarine operating near Tawi Tawi. Every destroyer captain received identical orders: maximum aggression, no retreat under any circumstances, kill that submarine. On June 8th, Dealey took Harder south toward Sibutu Passage, the narrow strait between Tawi Tawi and Borneo. Japanese destroyers patrolled that passage constantly. It was the main shipping route between the Philippines and the resource-rich territories to the south. Dealey wanted to see exactly how many destroyers he could sink before the Japanese figured out his tactics. At 2:00 in the afternoon, Harder's lookouts spotted 2 destroyers steaming in formation. Tanakaze and an unidentified escort destroyer. Both were moving at 25 knots, conducting a standard search pattern with active sonar pinging constantly. Dealey studied their movements for 90 minutes from periscope depth, watching them complete their search pattern 3 times. The destroyers were following a predictable zigzag pattern, changing course every 8 minutes exactly. That predictability gave Dealey maybe 30 seconds to set up his attack after each course change, enough time if he positioned Harder correctly. He maneuvered the submarine directly into their search pattern and waited with the patience of a hunter in a blind. At 4:30 p.m., Tanakaze turned directly toward Harder's position. Range, 3,000 yards. Dealey let her close. 2,500 yards, 2,000 yards, 1,500 yards. The destroyer was charging straight at him now. Her sonar had definitely detected something. Her captain would be making preparations for a depth charge attack. At 1,200 yards, close enough to see individual sailors on Tanakaze's deck through the periscope, Dealey fired 4 torpedoes at 17-second intervals. The first torpedo missed by 20 feet, passing ahead of the destroyer's bow. The second struck Tanakaze near the bridge, punching through her hull and detonating inside the forward crew compartments. The third hit the forward magazine where ammunition for the 5-inch guns was stored. The explosion that followed was so massive that Harder's crew heard it clearly underwater, even with all hatches sealed. The shockwave hit the submarine like a physical blow, rolling Harder 15 degrees to port before she recovered. Tanakase's bow section separated completely from the main hull. Both pieces sank within 3 minutes, disappearing beneath the surface so fast that fewer than 20 sailors managed to abandon ship. The escort destroyer immediately turned and charged Harder's position at flank speed, dropping depth charges as she came. Dealey took Harder deep, 400 feet, well below her rated test depth, risking hull implosion to escape the depth charge patterns. The depth charges exploded overhead, shaking the submarine violently, but causing no critical damage. After 40 minutes of fruitless searching, the escort destroyer gave up and withdrew to report the attack. 3 destroyers in 3 days. But Dealey wasn't done yet, and his next attack would be the most audacious of all, sinking a destroyer in broad daylight, while 2 other Japanese destroyers watched helplessly. June 9, 1944. 5 in the morning. Dealey brought Harder to periscope depth 12 miles southwest of Tawi Tawi to scan the surface before full daylight. What he saw through the periscope made every man in the conning tower catch their breath. Dead ahead, 4 Japanese destroyers steaming in line abreast formation, actively searching for submarines. Their sonar was pinging so loudly that Harder's sonar operator could hear it without headphones. That meant they were close, very close, and actively hunting. Dealey had 8 torpedoes remaining in his forward torpedo room. 4 destroyers meant he might get 2 attacks before they overwhelmed him with sheer numbers. He studied their formation carefully through the periscope, looking for tactical weaknesses. The lead destroyer was zigzagging aggressively, too unpredictable for a reliable torpedo solution. The second destroyer was maintaining a steady course, probably serving as the formation guide. That steady course made her predictable. That made her Dealey's target. At 6:12 a.m., the second destroyer turned directly toward Harder's position. Range: 4,000 yards. The destroyer's captain had probably detected something on sonar. Maybe a periscope reflection, maybe a slight disturbance in the water. Whatever he'd detected, he was investigating. Dealey waited as the destroyer closed range: 3,000 yards, 2,500 yards. The destroyer was definitely coming for them now, increasing speed, her bow throwing white spray as she accelerated. At 1,800 yards, Dealey fired 3 torpedoes in a tight spread pattern. All 3 torpedoes struck the destroyer's port side within 5 seconds of each other. The concentrated explosions tore the destroyer's hull open from bow to stern. She exploded so violently that debris flew 300 feet into the air. Pieces of steel plating, life rafts, equipment, bodies. The destroyer rolled over and sank in 90 seconds. One moment she was a functioning warship. The next moment she was an expanding debris field on the ocean's surface. The other 3 destroyers immediately converged on Harder's position like wolves closing on wounded prey. Dealey took the submarine deep, 500 feet, far below test depth, risking catastrophic hull failure to escape the coordinated attack. Depth charges began exploding overhead. 23 in the first 10 minutes. The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the interior in eerie red illumination. Hull plates groaned under the enormous pressure. A pipe burst in the forward torpedo room, spraying seawater across the deck until damage control teams could isolate and repair it. Harder's crew worked in absolute silence, while depth charges continued detonating around them. They knew the drill. Make no unnecessary noise. Move carefully. Fix damage quickly and quietly. Give the destroyers no additional sonar contacts to track. After 2 hours, the destroyers withdrew. They'd exhausted their depth charge supplies without achieving a confirmed kill. Dealey carefully climbed to periscope depth and scanned the surface. The destroyers were gone. 4 enemy warships encountered. 1 sunk. 3 driven off. But Dealey wasn't thinking about his tactical success. He was calculating fuel consumption. Harder had burned through 60% of her diesel reserves in constant high-speed maneuvering and combat operations. Maybe 3 more days before she'd have to withdraw to Fremantle, Australia for refueling. Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, commander of the Japanese mobile fleet at Tawi Tawi, received reports of all 4 destroyer attacks by 2 p.m. on June 9th. 4 destroyers lost in 4 days. 1 American submarine. Ozawa was a professional naval officer who understood mathematics. If an American submarine could penetrate his defensive screen this easily and sink destroyers with this kind of efficiency, the entire anchorage was fundamentally vulnerable. American submarines could pick off his screening vessels one by one. Eventually, they'd get to the carriers and battleships. He sent an urgent encrypted message to Admiral Toyota. The mobile fleet must depart Tawi Tawi immediately. The Americans know our location. Remaining at anchor invites additional submarine attacks. Toyota agreed with Ozawa's assessment. Operation Ago required the mobile fleet to intercept the American invasion force approaching the Mariana Islands. But the operation wasn't scheduled to begin until June 15th, 6 days away. Moving early meant his carriers would arrive without proper reconnaissance. His destroyers would be scattered across multiple patrol zones. Supply lines wouldn't be established. But staying at Tawi Tawi with an American submarine systematically destroying his destroyer screen was strategic suicide. On June 10th at 8:15 in the morning, the Japanese mobile fleet departed Tawi Tawi. 4 battleships, 9 carriers, 15 cruisers, 24 destroyers, 4 fewer than planned because Dealey had sunk them. The entire fleet headed northeast toward the Philippine Sea, departing 6 days earlier than the operational plan specified. American codebreakers intercepted the movement orders within hours. Admiral Raymond Spruance, commander of the U.S. Fifth Fleet, adjusted his battle plans accordingly. The early departure gave American carriers an extra day to position themselves for what would become the Battle of the Philippine Sea. Dealey knew absolutely none of this strategic context. He was focused entirely on tactical problems. Specifically, 2 more destroyers he'd spotted patrolling north of Sibutu Passage. June 10th, 4:30 in the afternoon. Dealey positioned Harder for what he hoped would be his final attack of this patrol. He had 5 torpedoes remaining, enough for 1 more engagement, then he'd have to run for home. At 5:15 p.m., he fired 3 torpedoes at the lead destroyer. 1 struck near the bow. The destroyer slowed dramatically but didn't sink. The second destroyer immediately charged Harder's position. Dealey fired his last 2 torpedoes. Both missed. The range was too great, the angle too acute. Now he had no torpedoes left, no way to defend himself, and a Japanese destroyer bearing down on his position at 32 knots with clear intent to ram. "Emergency deep, all ahead flank," Dealey ordered. Harder's diving planes bit hard, pushing the submarine down at the maximum safe angle, 300 feet, 400, 500. The pressure hull groaned under stress it was never designed to handle. The destroyer passed directly overhead, her propellers churning the water so loudly that Harder's crew could hear individual blade strikes through the hull. Then silence as the destroyer passed. But Dealey knew the pattern. The destroyer would circle back, make multiple depth charge runs, keep attacking until either the submarine surfaced or the pressure hull imploded from accumulated damage. The first depth charge pattern dropped at 5:23 p.m. 6 charges exploded in a tight pattern around Harder. The submarine rolled 15 degrees to starboard. Light bulbs shattered throughout the boat. Men grabbed handholds instinctively. A second pattern dropped 2 minutes later. Closer this time. The explosions lifted Harder's stern violently and slammed it back down. Cork insulation rained from the overhead like snow. A hydraulic line burst in the control room, spraying fluid across instruments. For 90 minutes, the destroyer hunted Harder with methodical determination. 42 depth charges total. Most exploded too shallow or too far away to cause critical damage. But 3 came close enough to crack gauge glass and spring minor leaks throughout the pressure hull. Dealey kept Harder at 500 feet, far below safe depth, moving at 2 knots, making minimal noise. Every man aboard understood they were gambling their lives on the destroyer running out of depth charges before Harder's hull failed from accumulated stress. Finally, at 7:00 p.m., the destroyer withdrew. She'd exhausted her entire depth charge supply. Dealey waited another full hour before surfacing. The ocean was empty, no destroyers visible, no patrol planes overhead. Just darkness and the sound of diesel engines recharging batteries for the long journey home. Harder limped south toward Fremantle at 8 knots, preserving fuel for the 3,000-mile transit. She arrived on June 26th after a 17-day patrol that would change submarine warfare forever. Admiral Charles Lockwood was waiting on the pier when Harder tied up. He'd been tracking Dealey's patrol reports via radio intercepts. 5 destroyers attacked, 4 confirmed sunk, 1 damaged. In 12 days, the most successful anti-destroyer patrol in submarine warfare history. Lockwood personally awarded Dealey the Navy Cross on the spot, right there on the pier with Harder's crew watching. Then he asked the question every submarine commander dreaded. "Can you do it again?" Dealey's answer was immediate and characteristic. "Give me torpedoes and I'll sink 10 more." The Battle of the Philippine Sea began on June 19, 1944, 9 days after Harder sank her 4th destroyer off Tawi Tawi. Admiral Ozawa's mobile fleet engaged Admiral Spruance's 5th Fleet in what would become the largest carrier battle in naval history. 15 American carriers faced 9 Japanese carriers, 900 American aircraft against 430 Japanese aircraft. The battle lasted 2 days of intense combat across hundreds of miles of ocean. American pilots shot down 376 Japanese aircraft while losing only 30 of their own. American pilots nicknamed it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot because Japanese pilots fell from the sky like targets in a shooting gallery. 3 Japanese carriers sank: Taiho, Shokaku, and Hio. 2 battleships damaged. 1 cruiser sunk. The Imperial Japanese Navy lost 75% of its carrier air groups in 2 days of combat and would never recover operational capability. But historians analyzing the battle recognized something crucial. The engagement might have gone very differently if Admiral Ozawa had arrived on his original schedule. The operational plan called for the mobile fleet to depart Tawi Tawi on June 15th. That schedule would have given reconnaissance planes 4 days to locate the American fleet before the battle began. Japanese carriers would have been fully supplied, destroyer screens properly organized. The battle plan coordinated with land-based aircraft from the Philippines. Instead, Harder forced the mobile fleet to depart 6 days early. Ozawa arrived in the Philippine Sea on June 14th, with his fleet scattered across 200 miles of ocean. His reconnaissance aircraft had burned through fuel reserves during the early departure and couldn't conduct proper searches. His destroyers were still regrouping from anti-submarine patrols. His supply ships were 3 days behind schedule. When American carrier aircraft found Ozawa's fleet on June 19th, his carriers were still launching aircraft. His combat air patrol was undermanned. His fleet formation was disorganized. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot happened because Ozawa wasn't ready for battle. And Ozawa wasn't ready because Dealey had sunk 4 destroyers in 4 days, convincing Japanese command that Tawi Tawi was too dangerous to remain. Admiral Lockwood understood this strategic impact immediately. In his post-war memoir, he wrote that Harder's 5th Patrol was the most strategically important submarine operation of the Pacific War. 4 destroyers sunk meant 4 fewer escorts protecting Japanese carriers, but forcing the mobile fleet to depart Tawi Tawi early meant the entire Japanese battle plan collapsed before the first shot was fired. Harder's crew spent July in Fremantle undergoing repairs and resupply. Dealey spent the time training new crew members on down-the-throat attack tactics, sharing the lessons he'd learned through 5 war patrols and dozens of torpedo attacks. The training was unlike anything the replacement crew members had experienced at submarine school. Standard doctrine taught evasion and stealth. Dealey taught aggression and timing. A destroyer captain makes decisions based on assumptions, Dealey explained during a classroom session in Fremantle's submarine training facility. He assumes we'll dive deep when detected. He assumes we'll run away. He assumes we'll prioritize survival over engagement. Every assumption creates a predictable response pattern. We exploit those patterns. He used a chalkboard to diagram attack geometries, showing exactly how a submarine could position itself for a down-the-throat shot. The destroyer captain sees us at 2,000 yards. He orders flank speed and prepares to ram. He's thinking about collision geometry, Closing distance, turning radius, when to drop depth charges. He's not thinking about torpedoes because submarines don't fire torpedoes at charging destroyers. That's suicidal. Except it's not suicidal if you understand the timing. Pharmacist's mate first class. John Barker, one of the new crew members, raised his hand. What happens if the torpedoes miss, sir? Then we die, Dealey said flatly. The destroyer drops depth charges directly on our position. At close range, those charges will crack our pressure hull. So we don't miss. We calculate the solution perfectly. We fire at the right moment. We hit. The training wasn't just theoretical. Dealey ran drill after drill in Fremantle Harbor, practicing attack approaches against Australian destroyers who'd volunteered to serve as training targets. Harder would submerge. The destroyer would charge at flank speed, and Dealey's crew would calculate firing solutions as if this were actual combat. Lieutenant Samuel Logan, Harder's torpedo officer, supervised every drill personally. Logan was a mathematics graduate from MIT who understood ballistics better than anyone else in the submarine force. He'd calculated firing solutions for all 5 destroyer kills during the June patrol, and he knew exactly how small the margin for error was. At 1,800 yards, you have approximately 45 seconds from firing to impact, Logan explained to his torpedo room crew. The destroyer is closing at 35 knots. Our torpedoes are moving at 46 knots. Combined closure rate is 81 knots. That's 240 feet per second. If your firing solution is off by 3 degrees, the torpedoes pass harmlessly alongside the destroyer, and we die. The crew practiced until firing solutions became automatic. They could calculate range, speed, angle, and fire torpedoes in under 30 seconds, fast enough to respond to sudden destroyer attacks, precise enough to hit targets at point-blank range. Life aboard Harder between patrols followed the rhythm familiar to all submarine crews. Sleep during the day, when Fremantle's heat made the submarine's interior unbearable. Work on equipment maintenance during the cooler evenings. Drink at the submarine rest camp when off-duty. Try not to think about the next patrol. Enlisted men lived in cramped quarters where privacy didn't exist. Hot bunking was standard. 2 men shared 1 bunk, sleeping in shifts. Personal possessions were limited to what fit in a single small locker. The smell of diesel fuel, body odor, and cooking food permeated everything. Morale remained surprisingly high despite the cramped conditions and constant danger. Submarine crews developed fierce loyalty to their boats and commanders. Harder's crew believed their captain was the best in the Pacific Fleet. They'd survived 5 war patrols under his command. They'd sunk more enemy ships than most submarines sank in their entire service careers. They trusted Dealey completely. Chief Torpedoman's mate Wilfred Moore had served aboard Harder since commissioning. 34, he was one of the oldest enlisted men aboard, and had seen submarine warfare evolve from cautious to aggressive under Dealey's command. Other boats run from destroyers, Moore told new crew members over beers at the submarine rest camp. We hunt them. The skipper figured out that Japanese destroyer captains are predictable. They follow doctrine rigidly. They expect us to behave according to their assumptions. When we don't, they hesitate. That hesitation gets them killed. Moore had personally loaded the torpedoes that sank Ikazuchi in April and all 4 destroyers during the June patrol. He understood the technical challenges of maintaining torpedo readiness in tropical conditions where heat and humidity caused constant mechanical problems. Torpedoes are temperamental weapons, Moore explained. The Mark 14 has depth control problems, magnetic exploder failures, and contact detonator issues. We've had torpedoes run under targets without exploding. We've had them explode prematurely. We've had them circle back toward us. But the skipper understands how to compensate for the problems. He fires multiple torpedoes in spread patterns. He aims for close-range shots where depth control problems don't matter as much. He uses contact exploders instead of magnetic exploders, because contact exploders are more reliable. The technical expertise of Harder's crew made Dealey's aggressive tactics possible. You couldn't charge destroyers at close range unless your torpedoes functioned perfectly. Harder's torpedo room crew maintained their weapons with obsessive attention to detail. By late July, Every submarine commander in the Pacific had studied Harder's patrol reports in detail. The aggressive tactics worked. Between June and August 1944, American submarines sank 14 Japanese destroyers using variations of Dealey's approach. But learning from Dealey's success required more than just reading patrol reports. It required understanding the psychology behind his tactics and the precise timing that made them work. Admiral Lockwood recognized this immediately and ordered Dealey to conduct tactical briefings for other submarine commanders stationed at Fremantle and Pearl Harbor. In late July 1944, Dealey spent 2 weeks at Pearl Harbor conducting what became known as the Destroyer Killer School. Intensive training sessions where he walked other submarine commanders through every aspect of his tactics. Commander Richard O'Kane of USS Tang attended these sessions. O'Kane was already one of the most aggressive submarine commanders in the Pacific, but even he was impressed by Dealey's methodical approach to hunting warships. Dealey didn't just attack destroyers randomly, O'Kane later wrote in his memoirs. He studied their behavior patterns. He understood that Japanese destroyer captains followed rigid tactical doctrine. They zigzagged at predictable intervals. They responded to submarine contacts with predictable maneuvers. Once you understood those patterns, you could position yourself to exploit them. O'Kane took Dealey's lessons to heart. Between August and October 1944, Tang sank 2 Japanese destroyers using down-the-throat attacks. The first was destroyer Asanagi on August 25th, the day after Harder was lost. The second was destroyer Wakaba on October 10th. Both attacks followed Dealey's tactical principles exactly: close range, frontal approach, multiple torpedoes in spread pattern, immediate dive beneath the target's keel. Commander Eugene Fluckey of USS Barb attended the same training sessions. Fluckey was known for aggressive tactics that sometimes bordered on reckless, but he recognized that Dealey's aggression was calculated rather than impulsive. The difference between reckless and aggressive is preparation, Fluckey explained to his officers after returning from Pearl Harbor. Dealey prepared for every engagement. He studied enemy tactics. He practiced firing solutions until his crew could execute them automatically. He knew exactly when to be aggressive and when to evade. That's not recklessness. That's tactical brilliance. Barb sank destroyer Hirato on September 19, 1944, using a modified down-the-throat approach. Instead of firing at a charging destroyer, Fluckey positioned Barb directly in the path of a destroyer conducting a search pattern. When Hirato turned toward Barb's position, Fluckey was already at optimal firing position, with a perfect firing solution calculated in advance. 4 torpedoes struck Hirato amidships. The destroyer sank in 90 seconds. Commander Reuben Whitaker of USS Flasher also attended Dealey's training sessions. Flasher specialized in convoy attacks rather than warship hunting, but Whitaker recognized that Dealey's tactics could be adapted for attacking convoy escorts. Convoy escorts behave predictably, Whitaker noted in his patrol report from November 1944. They maintain station around merchant ships in fixed patterns. If you position yourself in their patrol route and wait, they come to you. Commander Dealey's down-the-throat tactic works perfectly in this scenario because the escort is moving toward you at predictable speed along a predictable course. Flasher sank 3 escort vessels between September and December 1944 using this approach. Each attack followed Dealey's principles. Wait for the target to establish a predictable course. Calculate the perfect firing solution. Fire at close range when the target can't evade. Dive beneath the target's keel immediately after firing. But adopting Dealey's aggressive tactics came with risks that some submarine commanders learned the hard way. The down-the-throat attack only worked if every element was executed perfectly. Small errors in timing, calculation, or execution could be fatal. Commander George Street of USS Tarante attempted a down-the-throat attack against destroyer Nashi in April 1945. Street had studied Dealey's tactics extensively, but made a critical error in calculating the firing solution. His torpedoes passed 50 feet ahead of Nashi's bow, close enough to miss, not close enough to detonate from proximity fuses. Nashi immediately charged Tarante's position and dropped a full pattern of depth charges directly over the submarine. 3 charges exploded within 30 feet of Tirante's pressure hull. The submarine suffered severe damage, cracked hull plates, flooding in the after-torpedo room, loss of depth control. Street barely managed to bring Tirante deep enough to escape further attacks. He limped back to Guam for emergency repairs, his submarine nearly destroyed because of a 3-degree error in his firing solution. Dealey made it look easy, Street later admitted in a post-patrol debriefing. But there's no margin for error. If your calculations are off by even a small amount, you die. Dealey's genius wasn't just aggression, it was precision aggression backed by perfect execution. The tactical revolution Dealey started extended beyond down-the-throat attacks. His aggressive philosophy influenced how submarine commanders approached all combat situations. Before Harder's June 1944 patrol, submarine doctrine emphasized caution and stealth. After Harder's June patrol, doctrine increasingly emphasized initiative and aggression. Submarines began positioning themselves deliberately in high-traffic areas where Japanese warships operated frequently. Instead of avoiding Japanese naval bases, submarines started operating close to harbors where they could intercept warships entering or leaving port. Instead of diving deep when destroyers approached, submarines started evaluating whether attacking the destroyer made more tactical sense than evading. This doctrinal shift dramatically increased American submarine effectiveness against the Japanese Navy. Between June 1944 and August 1945, American submarines sank 126 Japanese warships, more than double the number sunk in the previous 30 months of war combined. Admiral Lockwood tracked these statistics carefully and credited Dealey directly with the increase in warship kills. In a classified memo to the Chief of Naval Operations in March 1945, Lockwood wrote, "Commander Dealey's tactical innovations have fundamentally transformed submarine operations in the Pacific. His aggressive doctrine has been adopted fleet-wide with remarkable results. We are no longer hunting only merchant ships. We are hunting the entire Japanese Navy." On August 5th, Harder departed Fremantle for her 6th war patrol. She'd been assigned to operate as part of a 3-submarine wolf pack with USS Harder and USS Harder. Commander Dealey was in tactical command of the group. Their mission, patrol waters west of Luzon and attack Japanese shipping heading to the Philippines. The patrol started well. On August 21st, the wolf pack intercepted a 16-ship convoy off Palawan Bay. In a coordinated attack lasting 7 hours, they sank 4 cargo ships totaling 22,000 tons. On August 22nd, Harder and Harder attacked 3 coastal defense vessels off Bataan. All 3 sank. By August 23rd, Harder had expended all her torpedoes and withdrew from the patrol area. That left Harder and Harder operating together off Dassault Bay on the western coast of Luzon. Japanese naval intelligence had been tracking the Wolfpack's movements through radio direction finding and patrol plane sightings. They knew approximately where the American submarines were operating. And they'd sent specialized anti-submarine vessels, specifically trained and equipped to hunt submarines. At 4:53 on the morning of August 24, 1944, USS Harder submerged 4 miles off Hermana Island. Through her periscope, Harder's captain could see Harder on the surface 4,500 yards to the south. Both submarines were preparing to attack a damaged Japanese destroyer that Harder had torpedoed the previous day. Then Harder's sonar operator heard something that made his blood run cold. Echo-ranging sonar. Active sonar pinging. Close. Getting closer rapidly. 2 Japanese escort ships were closing on Harder's position at high speed. Coastal defense vessel CD-22 and minesweeper W-102. Both were moving at 18 knots, conducting aggressive sonar searches. They'd been hunting American submarines for 3 consecutive days, based on intelligence reports about Wolfpack operations in the area. Harder's captain immediately ordered his submarine deep and silent. He couldn't warn Harder without revealing his own position to the Japanese escorts. He watched helplessly through his periscope as the 2 enemy ships closed on Harder. At 5:20 a.m., Harder crash-dived. The Japanese escorts were less than 2,000 yards away. Dealey had spotted them at the last possible moment and was taking his submarine down as fast as possible. But Harder's diesel engines were still running as she submerged. Standard procedure during a crash dive. You shut down engines after submerging to save precious seconds. The running diesels left a massive bubble trail on the surface that pinpointed Harder's exact location. CD-22's sonar operator had a perfect contact. Range 1,200 yards. Depth approximately 200 feet and still diving. The escort ship's captain ordered an immediate depth charge attack. At 5:47 a.m., CD-22 made her first pass over Harder's position and dropped a full pattern of depth charges set to detonate at 250 feet. The explosions bracketed Harder perfectly. At least 3 depth charges detonated within 50 feet of her pressure hull, close enough that the shock waves acted like hammer blows against steel. Harder's pressure hull cracked near the after torpedo room. Seawater began flooding in at tremendous pressure. At 250 feet depth, water pressure was over 100 pounds per square inch. The stern compartments flooded completely within 90 seconds. The submarine's bow rose sharply as the flooded stern dragged her down by the tail. Dealey ordered all ballast tanks blown, emergency surface procedure. Compressed air roared into the ballast tanks, fighting against the flooding water, trying to force the submarine to the surface where the crew could abandon ship. But there was too much water in the stern compartments. The compressed air system couldn't overcome the flooding. Harder couldn't reach the surface. At 5:52 a.m., CD-22 made a second depth charge run. This pattern hit even closer. Multiple depth charges detonated within 20 feet of Harder's pressure hull. The explosions ruptured the main pressure hull in multiple locations. The control room flooded. All electrical power failed. Emergency lighting went dark. At 600 feet, well below Harder's maximum rated depth of 400 feet, the pressure hull began imploding. Bulkheads collapsed under pressure they were never designed to withstand. Compartments crushed like aluminum cans. The submarine lost all structural integrity in seconds. USS Harder and 79 men were gone in less than 3 minutes from the first depth charge impact. At 6 a.m., CD-22 and W-102 reported a successful kill to headquarters. Large quantities of oil, wood debris, and cork insulation were floating to the surface, the telltale signs of a destroyed submarine. The Japanese ship circled the area for 2 hours, dropping additional depth charges to ensure the submarine was completely destroyed. They recovered no survivors. All 79 men aboard Harder died that morning. Commander Samuel David Dealey, age 37, winner of the Navy Cross, destroyer killer, one of the most aggressive submarine commanders in the Pacific. Radio man Calvin Bull, who'd earned the Bronze Star for his role in the destroyer, kills off Tawi Tawi, every officer and sailor who'd helped make Harder the most feared submarine in the Pacific Ocean. USS Harder remained submerged until nightfall. Her captain filed a contact report describing Harder's loss. The message reached Admiral Lockwood at Pearl Harbor at 8 a.m. on August 25th. Lockwood immediately suspended all submarine operations in the Dassault Bay area and ordered every boat to withdraw to safer waters. The news devastated him personally. Dealey had been one of his most effective commanders, a submarine captain who understood that aggressive tactics saved more lives than defensive caution. The news reached the United States in early September. The Navy Department announced that USS Harder was presumed lost with all hands. No additional details were provided. Submarine operations remained highly classified throughout the war. The American public wouldn't learn the full story of Harder's fifth patrol until years after the war ended. But the Japanese knew. Admiral Toyota received the report on August 26th. The submarine that had terrorized his destroyer fleet for 3 months was finally gone. He personally ordered commendations for CD-22's crew. What Toyota didn't fully understand was how much damage Dealey had already done, and how those 4 days in June had changed the entire strategic situation in the Pacific. Between December 1941 and August 1944, American submarines sank 1,314 enemy ships, totaling 5.3 million tons. Japanese merchant vessels, cargo ships, tankers, troop transports, but only 29 warships in that entire total. Most submarine captains avoided warships deliberately. Too dangerous, too well-armed, too fast. The risk-to-reward calculation didn't make sense when slow-moving cargo ships offered easier targets. Dealey proved that submarines could hunt warships successfully if they employed aggressive tactics that violated every assumption about submarine behavior. Submarines weren't supposed to charge destroyers, they were supposed to run. When Harder charged instead, Japanese destroyer captains hesitated. That hesitation cost them 12 critical seconds, enough time for torpedoes to close range and strike. By war's end, American submarines using Dealey's tactics had sunk 214 Japanese warships, 4 aircraft carriers, 1 battleship, 9 cruisers, 38 destroyers. The rest were submarines, escort vessels, and patrol craft. Japan started the war with 63 destroyers. They built 49 more during the war. American submarines sank 38 of them, 34% of Japan's entire destroyer force. Harder alone accounted for 5 destroyers in 5 months of operations. The tactical revolution Dealey started continued long after his death. Before Harder's 5th patrol, submarine doctrine emphasized stealth and evasion. After Harder's 5th patrol, doctrine emphasized aggression and initiative. Between June and December 1944, 12 American submarines adopted down-the-throat attack tactics against destroyers. USS Tang sank 2 destroyers, USS Trigger sank 1, USS Barb sank 1 destroyer and damaged another. USS Flasher sank 3 escort vessels using frontal attacks. The success rate was 63%. For every 5 attacks, submarines sank 3 destroyers and damaged 1 more. On March 27, 1946, President Harry Truman presented Commander Samuel David Dealey's Medal of Honor to his widow, Edwina Dealey, in a ceremony at the White House. The citation read, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty as commanding officer of the USS Harder during her 5th war patrol in Japanese-controlled waters." This remarkable record of 5 vital Japanese destroyers sunk in 5 short-range torpedo attacks attests to the valiant fighting spirit of Commander Dealey and his indomitable command. The Navy named a destroyer escort after him, USS Dealey, commissioned in 1954. She served until 1972, participating in the Cuban Missile Crisis and multiple deployments to Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War. Harder received the Presidential Unit Citation for her first 5 war patrols, 6 battle stars for World War II service. Her motto, "Hit 'em harder," became legendary throughout the submarine force and remains one of the most recognized submarine mottos in naval history. But Harder's real legacy was the tactical revolution she started. Modern submarine warfare still teaches Dealey's fundamental principle. When your enemy expects defensive behavior, aggressive action often works better than evasion. On May 22, 2024, exactly 80 years after she was commissioned, an underwater exploration team led by Tim Taylor and the Lost 52 Project discovered Harder's wreck in the South China Sea. She sits upright on the seafloor at a depth of 3,750 feet, 12 miles west of Dassault Bay, where she made her final dive. The discovery came after 3 years of research and 2 failed search expeditions. Tim Taylor's team had been searching for lost World War II submarines since 2016, using advanced sonar technology and historical research to locate wrecks in some of the deepest waters on Earth. Finding Harder required analyzing 79-year-old patrol reports, Japanese naval records, and USS Hake's eyewitness account of the sinking. The team narrowed the search area to a 15-square-mile zone west of Dassault Bay, then spent 6 days conducting sonar sweeps in water depths exceeding 3,000 feet. On the morning of May 22nd, the sonar system detected a submarine-sized object on the seafloor. The team deployed a remotely operated underwater vehicle equipped with high-definition cameras. At 11:47 a.m., the ROV's cameras revealed what they'd been searching for: a Gato-class submarine sitting upright on the bottom, her conning tower clearly visible, her hull number partially obscured by marine growth but still readable. 257, USS Harder. Found after 80 years. The wreck is remarkably intact despite the catastrophic depth charge damage that sank her. Her pressure hull remains mostly whole, except for massive ruptures near the conning tower, where CD-22's depth charges struck with fatal precision. The conning tower itself shows blast damage consistent with multiple close-range explosions. Both periscopes are bent but still attached. The forward torpedo room hatch is open, probably blown open by internal pressure during the sinking. Marine growth covers much of the hull. 80 years of biological accumulation in deep water creates layers of coral, sponges, and other organisms that obscure details. But the fundamental structure is recognizable. This is definitely Harder, lying in her final resting place 3/4 of a mile beneath the surface. Tim Taylor's team spent 3 days documenting the wreck with high-definition video and sonar mapping. Under international maritime law and U.S. naval regulations, the wreck is a protected war grave. They couldn't touch it, couldn't recover artifacts, couldn't disturb the site in any way. But they could document it completely, creating a permanent visual record of how the submarine looks 8 decades after she died. The discovery brought immediate closure to families who had waited their entire lives for answers. For 80 years, Harder's fate was known, but her location remained a mystery. Families knew their fathers, grandfathers, and uncles had died on August 24, 1944. They knew the submarine had been sunk by Japanese depth charges, but they didn't know where she rested. Mary Catherine Dealey Cole was 6 years old when her father died commanding USS Harder. She grew up with photographs and stories, but no grave to visit, no physical place to mourn. Now 75 years old, she traveled to the Philippines when the Lost 52 project announced they'd found the wreck. For 70 years, my father existed only in memories and Medal of Honor citations, she said in an interview after viewing the wreck footage. Now we know where he rests, we know the submarine is intact, we know he's not lost anymore, he's found. That brings a piece I didn't know I was missing. The Lost 52 project notified the U.S. Navy immediately after confirming the wreck's identity. The Navy conducted its own verification using the video footage and sonar data, comparing hull features to construction blueprints from 1942. They confirmed this was USS Harder within 48 hours. The Navy held a memorial ceremony at sea on June 6, 2024, 80 years to the day after Dealey sank Minakazi off Tawi Tawi. Family members of 23 crew members attended, traveling from across the United States to the Philippines for the ceremony. The ceremony took place aboard USS Topeka, a Los Angeles-class submarine that had sailed from Pearl Harbor specifically for this event. Topeka positioned herself directly over Harder's wreck site. The submarine's commanding officer, Commander Michael Rodriguez, read the names of all 79 men who died aboard Harder. After each name, a submarine sailor rang the ship's bell once. 79 rings, one for each lost sailor. The sound echoed across the water while family members stood on Topeka's deck, knowing their loved ones lay 3/4 of a mile beneath them. Several family members threw flowers into the water, roses, carnations, lilies floating on the surface before slowly drifting away on the current. Some threw coins, continuing an old Navy tradition of paying respect to shipmates who died at sea. Janet Bull Richardson was 78 years old when she attended the ceremony. Her father, Calvin Bull, had been Harder's radio man, the sailor who earned a Bronze Star for his role in sinking 5 destroyers. Calvin was 24 when he died. Janet was born 3 months after his death. She never met her father. "My mother told me stories," Janet said. "She said my father was brave. She said he served with the best submarine crew in the Pacific. She said he died doing something important, but she never had a place to visit, never had a grave. Now I do. I can come here. I can know this is where he rests." The discovery also brought attention to the families of crew members whose stories had been forgotten by history. Everyone remembered Commander Dealey, Medal of Honor recipient, destroyer killer, legendary submarine commander. But 78 other men died that morning, and their names had faded from public memory. Thomas Morrison, who went by the nickname Moose among the crew, was a motor machinist's mate from rural Kentucky. He joined the Navy to escape poverty during the Depression, found a home in the submarine service, and planned to open a motorcycle repair shop after the war. He was 22 when he died. His younger sister, Elizabeth Morrison Hart, was 93 years old in 2024. the last living sibling of any Harder crew member. Tommy loved submarines, Elizabeth remembered. He wrote letters describing life aboard Harder. He talked about the captain who wasn't afraid of anything. He said they were doing important work, sinking Japanese ships that carried supplies to enemy soldiers. He said he'd be home soon. Then the telegram came, saying his submarine was lost with all hands. Elizabeth had kept every letter her brother sent, 63 letters written between December 1942 and July 1944. The last letter arrived in August 1944, written weeks before Harder's final patrol. In it, Tommy mentioned he'd been promoted to motor machinist's mate first class. He described a new crew member who couldn't stop vomiting during his first dive. He asked Elizabeth to send more chocolate in her next care package, because chocolate was the only thing that tasted good after weeks underwater. The Lost 52 project is working to create a detailed 3D model of Harder's wreck using sonar data and video footage. When completed, the model will be available online, allowing anyone to virtually explore the submarine's final resting place. The project hopes this will provide a way for families and history enthusiasts to connect with Harder's story without disturbing the war grave. It meant bringing closure to families who had waited 80 years for answers about what happened to their fathers, grandfathers, uncles, brothers. It meant honoring 79 men who changed naval warfare forever through courage and aggressive tactical innovation. Today, the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, still teaches the down-the-throat attack as a case study in aggressive warfare. Not because modern submarines use the same tactic. Modern torpedoes are wire-guided and don't require close-range attacks, but because Dealey's approach demonstrates a fundamental principle that transcends specific tactics. When your enemy has established assumptions about your behavior, violating those assumptions creates tactical advantage. Commander Dealey's grave is at Arlington National Cemetery in Section 59, grave 874. His headstone lists his rank, his dates of service, and one line that captures everything. Medal of Honor, Destroyer Killer. But Dealey's grave is only one of several memorials that honor Harder's crew. The submarine community has worked to ensure that all 79 men are remembered, not just the commanding officer who earned the Medal of Honor. The Submarine Memorial at Arlington National Cemetery includes a bronze plaque listing every American submarine lost in World War II. USS Harder's name appears on that plaque, along with the names of 51 other submarines that never came home. On Memorial Day each year, submarine veterans gather at this memorial to remember the 3,505 submariners who died during the war, 22% of everyone who served in the submarine force. The USS Beaufort Submarine Museum in Pearl Harbor maintains an extensive exhibit about Harder and the other lost boats of World War II. The exhibit includes photographs of Harder's crew, copies of patrol reports, personal items donated by families, and detailed descriptions of each war patrol. Visitors to the Beaufort Museum can walk through a World War II submarine similar to Harder and experience what life was like for the crew. The cramped quarters, the diesel smell, the torpedo room where men slept on racks between torpedo tubes, the control room where Dealey would have stood giving orders during attacks, the conning tower where he looked through the periscope at approaching destroyers. People don't understand how small these submarines were, museum docent James Patterson explains to visitors. 79 men lived in a space smaller than most houses. They shared bunks. They breathed recycled air. They went weeks without showering. They ate canned food and whatever fresh provisions they'd loaded before patrol. And they did all this while Japanese destroyers hunted them constantly. The museum also maintains an oral history project that recorded interviews with surviving World War II submariners before they died. While no Harder crew members survived to be interviewed, several sailors who served on other submarines during the same period provided insights into what life was like aboard submarines in 1944. Chief Petty Officer Vincent Murphy, who served aboard USS Pampanito during the same period, Harder was operational, described the psychological pressure of aggressive combat patrols. You lived with constant fear that the next depth charge would be the one that cracked your hull. You heard them exploding overhead. You felt the shock waves. You watched gauge needles jump as explosions created pressure waves in the water. You knew if the hull cracked, you'd drown in minutes at depth. There was no escape, no rescue, just death and darkness thousands of feet underwater. Murphy respected Dealey tremendously, having met him twice at Pearl Harbor between patrols. Dealey was calm, Murphy remembered. Other commanders showed stress after difficult patrols. They'd drink too much at the rest camp or get into fights or just sit alone. Dealey was always composed. He'd talk about his tactics like a chess player discussing strategy. No emotion, no fear, just cold calculation about how to sink more enemy ships. The submarine community's remembrance of Harder extends beyond museums and memorials. Several modern submarines have carried Harder's heritage forward through naming and traditions. USS Dealey, DE Tanzan 6, a destroyer escort commissioned in 1954, served until 1972. She participated in the Cuban Missile Crisis blockade in 1962, deploying to waters off Cuba, where Soviet submarines operated. Her crew adopted Harder's motto, "Hit 'em harder," as their unofficial slogan, maintaining the aggressive spirit of the submarine they honored. In 2019, the Navy announced plans for a new Virginia-class attack submarine to be named USS Hyman G. Rickover. While not named directly after Harder, the submarine's crew has expressed interest in adopting some of Harder's traditions, including the destroyer killer legacy in their operational philosophy. Modern submarine commanders still study Dealey's tactics at the Naval Submarine School in Groton, Connecticut. An entire course module is dedicated to analyzing Harder's June 1944 patrol, breaking down each destroyer engagement to understand the decision-making process Dealey employed. Commander Lisa Davis teaches this course to prospective submarine commanding officers. She emphasizes that while modern submarine warfare has changed dramatically due to technology, the psychological principles Dealey employed remain relevant. Modern submarines don't fight the way Harder fought, Davis explains to her students. Our torpedoes are wire-guided. Our sensors can detect targets from hundreds of miles away. We don't need to position ourselves at close range, but Dealey's fundamental insight remains valid. Understand your enemy's assumptions and exploit them. If your enemy expects defensive behavior, aggressive action creates tactical advantage. The families of Harder's crew have worked to keep their loved ones' memories alive across 3 generations. Many descendants have served in the submarine force themselves, carrying forward the legacy in direct lineage. Robert Dealey, Commander Dealey's grandson, graduated from the Naval Academy in 1995 and served as a submarine officer for 8 years. He commanded a Los Angeles-class submarine briefly before leaving the Navy for civilian life. Growing up as Sam Dealey's grandson created expectations, Robert explains. People assumed I'd be as aggressive and fearless as my grandfather. But he wasn't fearless, he was calculated. He studied his enemy, he prepared meticulously. He took risks only when the mathematics favored success. That's different from being reckless or fearless. That's being professional. Jennifer Bull Morrison, granddaughter of radio man Calvin Bull, works as a naval historian specializing in World War II submarine operations. She's written 2 books about submarine warfare and gives frequent lectures at naval museums and submarine bases. My grandfather was 24 when he died, Jennifer says. I never knew him. My father barely remembered him. He was 3 years old when the telegram arrived saying Harder was lost. But I've spent my career studying what he did, researching his service, understanding his role in Harder's success. It's my way of knowing him, of keeping his memory alive. The annual Harder Memorial Gathering takes place every August 24th at the Submarine Memorial in Arlington. Descendants of crew members attend from across the country. They share stories passed down through families. They place flowers. They maintain connections with other families who lost loved ones that same morning in 1944. These gatherings have become smaller over the years as generations pass. In the 1980s, siblings and spouses of crew members attended, people who had known the sailors personally. In the 2000s, children attended. Now it's mostly grandchildren and great-grandchildren, maintaining traditions honoring ancestors they never met. But the commitment to remembrance remains strong. These descendants understand that their family members changed submarine warfare, that the destroyer kills in June 1944 forced Japan's mobile fleet to leave Tawi Tawi early, that the early departure contributed to Japan's catastrophic defeat at the Battle of the Philippine Sea, that 79 men died in August 1944, but their tactical innovations saved countless American lives by shortening the Pacific War. Families of Harder's crew visit every year on August 24th, the anniversary of her sinking. They place flowers on the memorial plaque dedicated to submarine sailors lost in World War II. They share stories about grandfathers and great-uncles who died at 22 or 25 or 37, fighting a war most of them never expected to survive. The 79 men aboard Harder came from 38 states. Farm boys from Iowa, factory workers from Michigan, college graduates from California. They volunteered for submarine duty knowing the casualty rates. 22% of submarine sailors who served in World War II died, the highest percentage of any branch of the American military. They knew the odds. They served anyway. They changed the course of the Pacific War by sinking 4 destroyers in 4 days and forcing the Japanese mobile fleet to leave Tawi Tawi before they were ready. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor. Hit that like button right now. Every single like tells YouTube's algorithm to show this story to more people who need to hear it. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications because we're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single week. Stories about submarine commanders who changed naval warfare through aggressive tactics and unshakable courage. Real people, real heroism, real history that's too important to forget. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. United States? United Kingdom? Canada? Australia? Japan? Our community stretches across the entire world, and you're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served in submarines. Tell us if you've ever visited a submarine museum. Just let us know you're here and you care about preserving these stories. Thank you for watching. Thank you for making sure Commander Samuel David Dealey and the 79 men of USS Harder don't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered. They changed how submarines fight. They saved thousands of American lives by forcing Japan to fight the Battle of the Philippine Sea before they were ready. And you're helping make sure their legacy lives forever.